What can be done about dangerous dogs? Hundreds of bites, but it's not just a stray problem. We'll talk about it. Plus, are Michigan students' latest test scores a disappointment or a step in the right direction? Today is Sunday, September 1st, 2019, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I hope your holiday weekend has been good so far, and I'm glad you're spending part of it with us. On this Tuesday, many of the kids who haven't already headed back to school will start the school year, and they do so against a new report that again lays bare the truth. It is not just the usual suspects, the typically struggling school districts. The entire state has been lagging in education. The latest findings show that while scores are inching up, more than half of our third grade students are failing at reading, and that is happening with a new law going into effect that means those who are more than a grade behind on reading and language skills may find themselves in the same grade until they improve. What are we missing? What is the answer for a state education system that has fallen so far so quickly? We're going to talk about that a little later on this morning. But up first, we're going to dig into the issue behind a news story that has even the most jaded among us in our newsroom still nursing profound sadness and confusion. It's the story of Emma Hernandez. 9 years old, out riding her bike when she was attacked and killed by a pair of pit bulldogs. We cover too many stories involving people or animals attacked by menacing dogs, but little seems to change. And predictably, after every such story, we hear from many who place the blame on the breed of pit bulls. And just as predictably, we hear from those who say it's not the breed, it's the owners. Is there anything to be done? It's up first this morning on Flashpoint. In the city of Detroit, more than 200 dog bites have been reported this year. Certainly an undercount of the actual total, and they of course run the gamut. Everything from a little nip that needs just a little attention to horrifying attacks that, as in the case of Emma Hernandez, are deadly. We have long had a problem with stray dogs running around with their inherent unpredictability, but clearly it is also a huge problem among dogs that have homes but are far too dangerous when they get loose. What can we do? Let's talk about it this morning with Charlie Beckham, recently retired as the neighborhood director for Detroit under Mayor Duggan, but among the many duties, and I think we've discovered it's every duty that you can have in the city of Detroit, Charlie's had at one time or another, in charge of animal control for Detroit for a while. Also here, Christina Rinaldi, the executive director of Detroit Dog Rescue, and lest we think this is just a problem being faced by Detroit, Randy Bruce here from the Farmington Hills City Council, where they now have in place an ordinance that does make it harder to keep a dangerous animal in your home. Thanks, gang, very much for being here.
You bet.
Charlie, I want to start with you because having been, I joke that how long you've been doing this for the city.
40 plus years.
Which also means you have watched this problem fester.
Absolutely.
Without much really addressing in any meaningful way over the years. What do we do?
Well, first, Devin, let me express my sympathies to the Hernandez family for such a horrific incident that happened. But you're right, animal control has been a problem for a long period of time. I had it when I was the group exec for the Department of Neighborhoods. Health Department was under that, and animal control was just transferring from DPD into the Health Department. We have a pretty robust ordinance for dogs on the books in Detroit, probably much like Farmington Hills, but it's not enough. But there is an ordinance. Our problem was always the staffing and support we had to implement that ordinance and to enforce the ordinance.
Like many other service issues that the city has seen over the years.
We had a terrible facility. It was too small, very hard to clean down in Southwest Detroit, so we did move that. We took the place of the Michigan Humane Society. When they built a new one, we took their place. It was too small when we moved in. We had a problem with recruitment of animal control officers. We had 9 back then. We've got 19 now, so we're moving forward. It was tough to recruit them because we didn't have a career path. And so now you can go from a tech to an animal control officer to an investigator. So there's a career path. We raised the salaries. We increased the budget. Having said all that, that's still not enough, but we're moving forward to try to really address a problem that, as Katrina knows, is just a very serious problem here in Detroit.
In fact, by the time Detroit Dog Rescue's done some exemplary work, you've gotten attention from all over the country for what you all do, and you're one of a number of groups that are trying to do that. But I also know that by the time a dog gets to you,
it can be too late.
Right,
course.
yeah. You know, we see a lot of different dogs and a lot of different temperaments throughout the city. We see some really great dog owners who just need dog food and need our help with outreach assistance. But we do see a lot of dangerous dogs, and we have created a partnership with Animal Control where we can call them. Just the other day, we ticketed somebody with 16 tickets and had them surrender their dog to us because it was a dangerous dog that got out of his doghouse and broke his chain. So we see just a multitude of things in the city. And, you know, absolutely, Animal Control has made a great jump, you know, in the last 5 years.
You feel a difference?
I do feel a difference, but it's, you know, we still need help. We're looking for a veterinarian in the city. We're looking for an animal control director. Both of those are up on the city government websites. We're, you know, desperately looking for those positions to help.
Trying to recruit to Katrina.
Yeah, yes.
What is the bigger problem, do you think? Is it the people who maybe don't know what they're dealing with the kind of dog they have? Because a lot of these dogs are multiple times rescued, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or is it the more menacing thing that we think that we have dogs that are trained to be
Right.
Menacing predators?
Both. You know, we have some very strong dogs in the city of Detroit because that's what's popular. Big, smushy face, short-coated dogs. And they've been trained, and I don't even want to say trained. A lot of them are. They're chained up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with an 18-inch chain to a doghouse. That's all they know. They're socially sensory deprived. So when that person moves out and leaves that dog behind and they eventually dig out that chain and they become a stray dog, they're totally socially sensory deprived, and anybody that comes near them, they will bite. We have a real issue, not with a breed of dog, not with a size of dog, how dogs are treated in the city of Detroit. And we have a city where people they love dogs. You know, we have a lot of great pet stores and a lot of people who love dogs. But we need to look at how we're treating these dogs.
We'll get back to the question of breeds in just a minute. Randy, I want to get to what's going on in Farmington Hills because you guys did have a bad thing happen where a dog attacked another dog, and you did something about it. Explain the way it went through in Farmington Hills.
Right. When we saw that there was a couple of dog attacks and then some people were bitten by dogs, we realized that the police didn't have all the tools that they needed to really successfully manage this problem.
They didn't have a law or an ordinance to enforce.
Right, and they just couldn't really go in and take dogs and do that type of thing. So we passed through an ordinance that was very comprehensive. It's not breed specific, but it's geared towards dangerous animals, and it identifies animals as either being potentially dangerous or dangerous. And there's different things for each level of dog and what the owner has to do. So it really puts the onus back on the owner to control what really is in effect a deadly weapon. I mean, that's what these dogs turn into.
As we've seen.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So if somebody has a dangerous dog, they can appeal that to a panel that's made up by the police chief, fire chief, veterinarian, animal behaviorist. But if it's still held that it's a dangerous animal, then they have to maintain certain types of enclosures. They have to have $1 million insurance policy. They have to.
That's going to knock a lot of folks out of the ability to do it.
But that's okay, because if people are not, or if they want to keep a dangerous animal, then it's just like any other deadly weapon. There has to be that level of protection there.
Has it worked?
Yes, we've seen a decrease in dog attacks, dog bites, and we have a number of those hearings that occur every year. Yeah. So we are identifying the problem, which is great, and the police now have more tools in which they can respond to this issue.
Right. I want to get back to the issue of breeds because, of course, the most notorious cases of these involve pit bulls or pit bull mixes. People always say to me, well, look, all dogs bite. And well, that's true. If a Cocker Spaniel bites me, I might need to go get a Band-Aid. If a pit bull bites you, you might need to be shopping for a new limb. It's just the difference in the animal. Why do you not think that this is important to be breed specific?
Because there's a lot of big dogs that can do a lot of damage. And by saying, you know, it's just a pit bull problem, a pit bull is an umbrella term. There is a lot of different breeds under pit bull, from, you know, your Mastiffs, American Bulldogs, even your Labrador mixes that are mixed with pit bull.
Yeah, how would we ever ferret out
who's
got it?
Right.
Who's got the worst?
And it's going to get way too technical. Is that a pit bull? Is your you know, aggressive Mastiff or Bordeaux, what does that fall under? So, you know, I think Farmington Hills has got it absolutely right when we look at what is a dangerous, not just dog, animal. Do you have any dangerous animal? I mean, there have been times where I know Detroit Animal Control has pulled alligators out of houses, which are obviously illegal, but, you know, it's not just a dog issue. We need to look at, you know, what kind of dangerous animal are people harboring?
And Detroit's ordinance Very similar, I'm sure, to Farmington Hills. I mean, it defines all of those things. There's a whole list of definitions, but somebody has to determine what that is and who fits into that definition. Now, in our ordinance, the director of the animal control makes that determination, but our challenge has been it's hard for us to even keep a director. But these are tough jobs.
In our city, it can be a police officer who makes that determination.
That's right.
We didn't put that power in just one person. Anybody in an authority position can declare that animal a dangerous animal, and then the owner can appeal it. So that way the response is much faster.
That's right.
And you can start doing something
right away. Then you go into
the
steps with the correction steps within the ordinance to get that done.
Well, it also won't come as a surprise to find that Farmington Hills is, I would imagine, fully staffed to be able to enforce its own,
probably bigger than ours.
A problem. Yeah, which is a problem here.
And I will say we have some of the best, and I've worked, with a lot of animal control officers. We have some of the best educated officers on the street right now. When Melissa Miller was handling animal control, she put a lot into educating some of these animal control officers that have stayed. So they know how to differentiate a dangerous dog, from a dog that's just having a bad day.
You told me earlier, every day you all pick up a dog that is beyond help.
Absolutely. Detroit Dog Rescue is Detroit's only no-kill shelter. And people say, oh, well, you don't euthanize anything. But I have an obligation. What no-kill means is that we rescue and rehab at least 90% of the animals that come through our door. And we put everything into it. We have a decompression process. We have a rehabilitation process. But I have an ethical responsibility not to place dangerous dogs out into the public. We have seen, we see the worst of the worst. We work side by side with Animal Control, Detroit Police. We did an FBI raid where a dog was fed gunpowder and cocaine to make him crazy. And, he was very sweet with me, one-on-one. I cannot place him.
I don't know what to do with that.
No, I can't, and his name was Samson, and this was not Samson's fault. But ethically, I cannot place that into the public. Every day we're getting calls, of dogs that are neglected, abused, socially sensory deprived. And it's extremely sad what we're seeing. And, with ordinances put into place, I just think that would help so much.
Charlie, you're not a lawyer, but the dogs that killed Emma Hernandez, that owner is now being held on murder charges
pretty serious
on a
charges.
$2 million bond, which she can't possibly make.
Right.
Does that change anything if you can kind of do what Kim Worthy's doing, which is clearly trying to make an example?
I hope that it delivers some kind of a message out there, but as Katrina says, this is such a huge problem. I don't know that one incident's going to solve it, but it can at least get it back up on the radar screen. We were talking about it in the green room. There needs to be more discussion and more sensitivity to this issue. It's really a bigger problem than people can imagine, and it's really difficult. And so you talk about euthanization. We got accused of that all the time back in the days when we didn't have enough space, and so not enough space was part of the problem. But we also knew there were dogs, as Katrina says, that should be put down.
Over the years, we've seen a lot of dog fighting problems in communities. I know you've dealt with that a lot of time, and those are dogs that it seems hard to, if they've been trained to do that.
You should not have them out in the public.
How often do you find yourself then fighting with owners who feel like you're treating them unfairly and that this is their right that you're trampling on?
It's really not that often. I think we have 3, 4, 5 hearings a year and people appealing those rulings. But otherwise, I think the community is happy that we're taking some steps to protect them and their animals so they can walk the street and feel safe, that they're not going to be necessarily attacked by somebody's dog who isn't controlled. So I think people like that. And I think, we have a lot of animal lovers in Farmington Hills, but they don't want to be attacked and they want to see dogs cared for, but they don't want to see these dangerous animals that can just wander around and hurt people.
Let's finish by letting you make your pitch here for responsible dog ownership.
No, I definitely think it's not just the dog's past that you have to consider. There are some fighting dogs that were used as bait dogs and whatnot. You have to consider each individual case, but what it's going to boil down to is it's going to take an animal welfare committee, like all of us up here, people that, know the laws, love animals, and there's got to be some middle line, some compromise there. And, I'm going to reach out to the mayor after this segment, and I think my biggest thing is we need some solutions. We all know the problem. I'm going to give them some, I think we've all talked about.
Yeah.
We'll provide you with a flash drive of this conversation.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you all very much.
It happened here.
It happened here. Heard it here. Say that all the time about Flashpoint. What's going to happen here in just a minute is a conversation about what's going on with the latest test scores for Michigan students. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.